It started with tire marks, deep, ugly grooves that cut through the edge of my freshly mowed lawn like claw marks on glass. I noticed them one morning while stepping out to grab the paper. Muddy streaks, curving right across my yard, ending just a few feet from my front porch. At first I thought it was an accident. Maybe a delivery driver turned too wide. Maybe a kid learning to drive. But when I saw the same tracks 2 days later, deeper, fresher, I knew it wasn't random. Someone was using my lawn as a shortcut. And in our neighborhood, that wasn't just disrespect, it was war. You see, our HOA had rules for everything. The height of your fence, the color of your shutters, even the number of inches your grass could grow before a fine landed in your mailbox. But somehow, the one rule they couldn't enforce was simple respect. So I decided to handle it myself. That afternoon, I waited by the window, sipping cold coffee as the sun started to dip. Around 5 p.m., I saw her, Karen Miller, the new neighbor across the street. Blonde bob, sunglasses, and a silver SUV that she always parked half on the curb. She was on her phone, barely paying attention, as she cut her steering wheel too, sharp, and rolled her front tire right over my lawn again. That was it. I stepped outside, waved her down, and said, as calmly as I could, "Hey, could you please stay off my lawn? You've driven over it a few times now." She didn't even look sorry. She just smirked, rolled down her window and said, "Maybe if you didn't plant your grass so close to the street, people wouldn't hit it." Then she drove off. I stood there stunned, a mix of disbelief and anger tightening my chest. It wasn't just the rudeness. It was the way she said it, like she was daring me to do something about it. That night, I walked out with a flashlight and placed 2 small wooden stakes near the edge of my yard, just to mark the boundary clearly. I figured that would end it. But the next morning, one of the stakes was gone, and in its place, a new tire track, cutting even deeper than before. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a message, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, I found the broken stake lying a few feet from the tire marks, snapped clean in half, like someone had stepped on it deliberately. The wood splinters were fresh, and I could still smell the faint scent of gasoline near the edge of the grass. That smell told me everything. It wasn't just carelessness. Karen had done it again. On purpose this time. I took photos from every angle. The crushed grass, the tracks, the broken stake, all of it. I figured if the HOA could fine people for leaving trash cans out for an extra hour, surely they'd care about someone tearing up another member's yard. I emailed the HOA right away, attaching the photos and writing, "Repeated property damage by neighbor at 200-224. Maple Drive. Please address this immediately." Their reply came an hour later. Short, dismissive. "We recommend speaking directly with your neighbor before escalating. HOA involvement is unnecessary at this time." Unbelievable. It was like asking the fox to negotiate with the hen about missing chickens. But I wasn't done. I printed the email and slid it into a folder. My growing file of evidence. I had a feeling I'd need it later. That evening, while raking the damaged spot, I saw Karen again. She was standing in her driveway, talking to another neighbor, loud enough for me to hear. "Some people just can't handle living in a community," she said, glancing straight at me. "They think they own the street." I ignored her. But my silence must have looked like weakness, because 2 nights later, I heard the unmistakable sound of gravel crunching at 11:30 p.m. I rushed to the window. Headlights flashed and then vanished. The next morning, my yard looked worse than ever. She'd done it again. 3 long tracks this time, cutting deeper into the soil. That was my breaking point. I set up my old motion-activated security camera on the porch, angled straight toward the lawn. The little red light blinked softly in the dark. My silent witness. For the next 2 nights, I didn't sleep much. I sat up, half watching the footage, half listening for that engine sound. On the 3rd night, around 11:47 p.m., the alert pinged on my phone. A vehicle, headlights, movement. I watched as the silver SUV rolled slowly up the curb, right onto my lawn again. This time there'd be proof, or so I thought. When I checked the footage the next morning, the camera was gone. The empty hook where my security camera used to hang made my stomach drop. The screws were still in place, but the camera itself, the one I had bought just to catch her in the act, was gone. No sign of it anywhere on the porch, the lawn, or even the flower beds nearby. Someone had taken it. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space, trying to make sense of it. The motion alert from last night, the SUV, the headlights, it all lined up. She must have seen the blinking red light, realized she was being recorded, and taken the camera. That meant she wasn't just being careless anymore. She was being bold. By noon, I'd filed a report with the local police. Officer Danvers came by, took a few notes and asked, "Any idea who might have done this?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I said. "My neighbor across the street. Karen Miller. She's been driving on my lawn. I set up the camera to catch her." He sighed. "You got any proof?" That question stung. I had proof, or at least I did. Danvers gave me a polite smile, the kind that said he didn't want to get involved in a neighborhood squabble. "We'll make a note of it," he said. "But without footage or witnesses, there's not much we can do." I knew it was coming, but hearing it still made me furious. That evening, I caught Karen watering her flowers like nothing happened. Her sprinklers shot arcs of water that nearly reached the street. And when she saw me watching, she waved. Waved, as if she hadn't just stolen my property. I didn't wave back. Instead, I walked over to the edge of my lawn, planted a new sign right in the center. A bright yellow one that read, "Private property, no trespassing, cameras in use." She saw it, of course, smirked again. Then, as if on cue, her husband came out with his phone, snapped a photo of my sign and said, "HOA's not gonna like that, buddy. You'll be hearing from them." And I did. 2 days later, I got a notice in the mail. "Signage not in compliance with community standards. Remove immediately or face penalty." I couldn't believe it. I was the one being punished, not the person tearing up my yard, not the one stealing cameras. That's when I decided to stop playing by their rules. If the HOA wanted to ignore it, I'd make sure they couldn't anymore. What I did next changed everything. The HOA letter sat on my kitchen table for 2 days before I finally crumpled it up. They wanted me to take down the sign. Fine. But I wasn't taking down my boundaries. Not again. That night, I drove to the hardware store and picked up a few things. Solar lights, short stakes, reflective tape, and something else. A small set of retractable driveway spikes. They weren't dangerous, just enough to make someone think twice before cutting across private property. If the HOA wasn't going to protect my lawn, I would. By midnight, I had lined the edge of the grass with the solar lights and set the tape between them, creating a bright, unmistakable boundary. I even posted a smaller sign by the mailbox. "Drive carefully. Lawn under repair." Nothing aggressive, just enough to make a point. The next morning, I noticed Karen's SUV parked in her driveway, door slightly open. She was watching me again, phone in hand, recording. I could hear her voice carry across the street. "Look at this nonsense," she said to someone on speaker. "He's turning his yard into a construction zone now. He's obsessed." I ignored her. But late that night, around 11:40 p.m., I heard it again, the familiar hum of her SUV's engine. My heart raced as I peered through the blinds. She was doing it again. Headlights crept toward the curb, then angled sharply. Her front tires rolled right over the grass. And then I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. Thump, thump. The SUV jerked. The driver's side dipped slightly. The car stopped dead. I stepped outside with my phone camera recording this time. She was out of the SUV in seconds, pacing and cursing under her breath. One of her front tires was flat, completely deflated. "What did you do?" She snapped when she saw me. I kept my voice calm. "You drove over my property again. You hit a repair stake. I told you to stay off my lawn." She pointed her phone at me. "You're done. I'm calling the HOA and the police." She did both. The next morning, I woke up to a small crowd on my street. 2 HOA board members, a police cruiser, and Karen, playing the victim, of course. She told them I'd set up spikes to damage her car intentionally. I explained it all. The tire marks, the stolen camera, the warnings ignored. But as the officers took notes, one of the HOA board members whispered something to another and looked straight at me. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She had friends on the HOA board, and now I was their problem. 2 days after the flat tire incident, I got an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp, just the HOA's seal. Inside was a formal notice. You are required to attend a community hearing regarding a violation of Section U 3A, Hazardous Modifications to Property. I almost laughed. Hazardous modifications? That was their way of saying I defended my own yard. The hearing was set for Friday evening in the small community clubhouse, a beige building that smelled like lemon, cleaner, and old coffee. When I walked in, Karen was already there, sitting at the far end of the table. Her husband leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. 3 HOA board members sat across from us with clipboards and forced smiles. The president, a tall man named Rick Delaney, cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the incident involving Mr. Lawson's property and Mrs. Miller's vehicle. Karen jumped right in. He planted metal spikes in his grass. My tire blew out. It could have caused an accident. I kept my composure. They were retractable driveway spikes. Plastic. Temporary markers for my boundary. She's been driving over my lawn for weeks. I have photos, timestamps, even a police report. Rick glanced at me, uninterested. The HOA's concern is community safety. Mr. Lawson, setting up anything that can damage a vehicle violates policy. I could feel my patience thinning. What about trespassing? Destruction of property? Does that violate anything? The room went quiet for a second. One of the board members scribbled something down but didn't look up. Karen folded her arms, smug. He's been targeting me. I feel unsafe living across from him. That hit me like a slap. Unsafe? She was the one causing all this. And somehow, I was being painted as the aggressor. After an hour of back and forth, Rick finally said, "We'll take this under review. For now, remove all stakes and signage. If any further complaints arise, additional action will be taken." I left the meeting furious. It was clear the HOA wasn't going to help me. They were protecting their own. That night, I walked out to my yard under the streetlight. The grass shimmered with dew, torn up in patches where her SUV had passed. My so-called hazardous markers sat piled beside the mailbox. As I bent down to gather them, I noticed something new. A footprint. Small, muddy, pressed deep into the grass, right where my camera used to be. It wasn't from Karen. It was too small. Someone else had been on my lawn that night. And they weren't just watching. They were helping her. That muddy footprint haunted me. It wasn't Karen's. Too small. Too narrow. Maybe a teenager's. Which meant someone else was involved. Someone helping her. Or at least sneaking around my yard at night. So, I did what any rational person would do. I doubled down. The next morning, I ordered 2 new cameras. Hidden ones this time. Small, motion-activated units disguised as solar pathway lights. I set one near the porch, facing the street, and another behind the hedge line near the corner of the yard. No blinking lights. No obvious wiring. Just quiet eyes watching. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The footage showed cars passing, a few stray cats, and the occasional jogger. I started to think maybe Karen had finally gotten the message. But on the 4th night, at 12:19 a.m., one of the cameras caught something. A shadow. It wasn't clear at first, just movement. A faint outline slipping past the hedge line. Then, as the figure moved closer, the shape became clear. A hooded person crouching near the base of my mailbox. They were doing something with their hands. Maybe unscrewing something, or placing something down. The whole thing lasted less than a minute, before they darted back toward the street and disappeared. The next morning, I went out to inspect. There it was. A small plastic bag taped underneath my mailbox. Inside, a note. No handwriting, just printed text. "Stop causing trouble. This is your final warning." No signature. I stared at the note for a long time. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was intimidation. Someone, maybe multiple people, wanted me silent. I took it straight to the police station. Officer Danvers was there again. He read the note, sighed, and said, "It's concerning, but unless there's a direct threat, there's not much we can do. You should avoid confrontation. Avoid confrontation." That's what they all said. The HOA, the police, even a couple of neighbors who started looking the other way whenever Karen's name came up. That night, as I reviewed the footage again, I noticed something else. The same figure in the hoodie had been standing across the street for nearly 10 minutes before coming to my mailbox, and behind them, just visible for a second, Karen's silver SUV. The camera caught her headlights flickering on and off like a signal. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just involved, she was orchestrating it, and whatever she was planning next was going to be bigger. After that note, everything changed. Neighbors who used to wave now avoided eye contact. The HOA board members, usually chatty during morning walks, crossed the street when they saw me. Something was going on, something coordinated, and I was being shut out. A week passed without another incident. Then one morning, while taking out the trash, I saw half a dozen cars parked outside the community clubhouse. It was a Thursday, not a regular HOA meeting night. I watched from a distance as people filed in. Among them, Karen, her husband, and the HOA president, Rick Delaney. No one had mentioned any special meeting. No email, no flyer, nothing. I decided to check the community website. The calendar was blank, not a word about what was happening. That's when I knew it wasn't an official HOA session. It was a private one. So that evening, I parked my truck 2 streets over and walked back quietly, sticking to the shadows. The clubhouse lights were still on. Through one of the small windows, I could see them. Karen standing up front, talking animatedly, waving her hands. Everyone else nodded. I crept closer. The window was slightly open. "He's filming everything," Karen was saying. "He's paranoid, aggressive, and making the neighborhood uncomfortable. We can't just let him keep doing whatever he wants." Then Rick's voice. "If he won't comply with HOA policy, we'll make him. I'll draft a formal violation and contact legal. It's about time we took control of this." Control. That word stuck in my mind. They weren't just discussing rules. They were planning something against me. I backed away quietly before anyone saw me and hurried home. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but anger. They'd twisted the whole situation around, turned me into the villain for wanting peace and privacy. The next morning, the letter arrived. "You are hereby fined $500 for failure to comply with HOA regulations regarding unsanctioned surveillance and improper signage. Repeated violations may result in legal action." That was the last straw. They wanted a fight. They'd get one. I scanned all my evidence. The tire marks, the photos, the missing camera report, the threatening note, and the new footage showing the hooded figure near Karen's car. Then I printed every single frame and slipped copies into manila envelopes, labeled with the names of 3 other neighbors who had also been bullied by the HOA before. If the board wanted to hide behind closed doors, fine. I was about to open those doors for everyone to see. By the next evening, I had hand-delivered 3 envelopes. One to Mark, the quiet guy who lived on the corner and once got fined for having his trash can out 15 minutes late. Another to Sandra, who the HOA forced to repaint her fence twice in one summer because the shade wasn't compliant. And the third, to Tom and Maria, who nearly sold their house after Rick Delaney accused them of running an unregistered business just because they sold plants from their garden. All of them had one thing in common. They'd been harassed or fined for reasons that didn't make sense. That night, they showed up at my house. Mark went first. "You weren't exaggerating," he said, flipping through the photos I'd given him. "That's her car, all right. And that's definitely Rick in the background of the meeting photo. They're working together." Sandra looked uneasy. "You know what this means, right? If we go up against them, they'll target us even harder." Tom crossed his arms. "Then maybe it's time someone did. They've been running this neighborhood like a dictatorship for years. It wasn't long before we decided what to do. We'd gather every piece of proof, photos, letters, emails, videos, and file a collective complaint directly with the City Housing Authority. That would bypass the HOA's internal cover-ups entirely. The next few days felt electric. Quietly, we started gathering stories from other residents, people who'd stayed silent for years because they were afraid of retaliation. It turned out the HOA had been fining residents for petty things while ignoring real violations from certain favored members, mostly friends of Rick and, of course, Karen. I learned Karen's husband, Doug, wasn't just an ordinary resident. He was the HOA's treasurer. That explained everything. The ignored complaints, the twisted rulings, the way every issue involving them magically disappeared. We weren't dealing with simple neighbors anymore. We were dealing with a network protecting itself. By the end of the week, we had over a dozen written statements, dozens of photos, and nearly an hour of footage, showing both HOA bias and suspicious late-night activity around my property. I compiled it all into a single file, named HOAevidence.zip, and sent copies to everyone involved. That night, as we met in my garage to finalize our next steps, a car slowed down outside. Headlights flashed twice. Sandra froze. That's Karen's SUV. We stayed silent, watching through the half-open garage door. The car idled for a moment, then drove off slowly. It was clear she knew something, and if she knew what we were planning, we were already in danger. The morning after that late-night drive-by, things started happening fast. At 7:30 a.m., I walked outside to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my mailbox. Notice of non-compliance. Property in violation of HOA Regulation 2C. The reason? Unauthorized exterior lighting. They meant the small solar lights, the same ones I'd installed after Karen's repeated trespassing. When I checked my neighbors' mailboxes, Mark, Sandra, and Tom had the same stickers. Different excuses. Excessive lawn decor, improper hedge trimming, non-standard fencing. It was retaliation, clear as day. Within 24 hours of forming our alliance, the HOA had hit every one of us with violations. Sandra was furious. "They're trying to intimidate us before we file the complaint," she said. "Let them," Tom replied. "If they want to make it obvious, we'll include this too." We decided to fast-track the submission to the City Housing Department. Everything was ready. We just needed signatures. I volunteered to drop the packet off in person the next morning. That night, though, something didn't feel right. At around midnight, I was reviewing my footage one last time when my power flickered. For a few seconds, the cameras went offline, then came back. When I checked the playback from the hedge camera, I caught something that made my blood run cold. A figure in a hoodie, the same one from before, walking up my driveway, this time carrying something metallic. The person knelt beside my porch and did something near the electrical box. Then, in the faint glow of the porch light, I saw a second person standing near the street. Karen. The camera caught her looking directly at the lens before they both turned and left. I rushed outside, flashlight in hand, but they were gone. I checked the electrical box. The latch was half open, and a small wire had been pulled loose. They'd tried to cut my power. The next morning, I told Mark and Sandra. They weren't surprised. Mark said he'd found his garbage can knocked over, tire tracks in his driveway, and his motion lights unplugged. "They're scared," he said. "That means we're close." We met again that night to finalize the complaint package. Everyone signed. I sealed it in a manila envelope and placed it by my front door, ready to deliver first thing in the morning. But when I woke up, the envelope was gone, and taped to my front door was a single sheet of paper. "You should have stopped when you had the chance." The sight of that note on my front door froze me in place. The handwriting was the same blocky print from the message under my mailbox. Cold, impersonal, typed and printed. Whoever had taken the envelope wanted me to know they were watching. The city complaint package was gone. Weeks of evidence, signatures and statements, just like that, erased. I called Mark immediately. "Check your porch," I said. "See if anything's missing." He was silent for a moment. Then, yeah, my camera feed's wiped. Last night's footage? Gone. Just static. Sandra reported the same. Her security app had logged a manual reboot at 2:03 a.m. None of us had done it. They'd hit all of us, synchronized. That morning, I walked over to the community clubhouse, determined to confront Rick Delaney face to face. The door was locked, but I could hear voices inside. I knocked once, silence, then footsteps. Rick opened the door just enough to block the entrance. "Can I help you, Mr. Lawson?" "Someone stole my evidence," I said, holding up the note. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" He didn't even blink. "Sounds like a police matter, not HOA business." I pushed back. "You're making it HOA business by covering for them. You think I don't know what's going on? The midnight meetings, the fake violations." Rick cut me off with a fake smile. "If you have concerns, file them properly. Until then, please stop harassing board members. It reflects poorly on the community." Then he shut the door. That click, that cold, final sound, was louder than any argument we'd had. As I walked home, I noticed Karen in her driveway again, spraying down her SUV. She looked up, smiled faintly, and said loud enough for me to hear, "Some people just can't take a hint." That was the moment I realized she wasn't hiding anymore. She wanted me to know she was winning. But she underestimated me. I still had the digital. Copies of the footage and notes, backed up in cloud storage. The physical packet was gone, but the truth wasn't. That night, I gathered everyone again. Mark brought coffee. Sandra brought her laptop. Together, we decided to go one step further. We wouldn't just file a complaint. We'd go public. A local community journalist, Ellen Reyes, had written an article last year exposing corruption in a nearby HOA. I still had her contact info saved, so I sent her everything. The photos, videos, emails, the threats. And I ended my message with one line: "If anything happens to us, you'll know where to start looking." 2 days passed after I sent that email to Ellen Reyes. No reply, not even a "got it." For a moment, I wondered if she'd ignored me, or worse, if someone had gotten to her first. Then, on the third morning, everything changed. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. Emails, texts, neighborhood group alerts. When I opened my messages, I saw the headline staring back at me from the local news site. "Residents claim HOA corruption and harassment in Maple Ridge community." Ellen had published the story. Front page. The article laid everything out. The fake fines, the threats, the missing footage, even screenshots from my security cameras showing Karen's SUV near my lawn at night. She'd blurred names for legal reasons, but included enough detail that everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who was who. Within hours, the entire street was buzzing. People were stepping out of their homes, pointing at the HOA office, talking in small clusters. I could feel the shift, fear turning into anger. Then came the fallout. The HOA board issued a statement calling the claims baseless and slanderous, but no one bought it. Neighbors started showing up at my house, quietly sharing their own stories. Extra fees they never agreed to, warnings that seemed to appear after personal disagreements, petty fines that mysteriously disappeared for certain favored residents. By the end of the day, half the neighborhood was talking about forming a recall vote to remove Rick and the board. But not everyone was happy. Around sunset, I saw Doug, Karen's husband, and the HOA treasurer pacing their driveway, phone pressed tight to his ear. His voice carried across the street. "They can't do this. The lawyer said we're exposed. Find out who leaked the files." Later that night, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked 2 houses down. Black sedan, windows tinted. It idled there for nearly 20 minutes before driving off slowly. Sandra texted, "You think they'll retaliate?" I replied, "Count on it." Sure enough, the next morning, someone dumped a bag of lawn clippings all over my driveway. A petty message, but a message nonetheless. Then, an hour later, a new email hit my inbox. No sender listed. Just one line. "You made a big mistake. People are watching." Attached was a still frame from one of my own cameras, a shot of me standing in my yard the night before. Someone had hacked my system, and now they weren't just trespassing. They were inside my network and inside my home. I stared at the image on my screen, me, in grainy night vision, standing in my own yard. It was from my camera, but the angle was wrong. The timestamp was wrong. Someone had pulled that footage directly from the cloud and edited it. They weren't just watching me now. They were inside my system. I unplugged every device that could connect to the internet. Router, smart, TV, doorbell cam, everything. Then I called my internet provider, reported the breach, and set up a full reset. But deep down, I knew this wasn't some random hacker. This was local. Someone in the neighborhood. That afternoon, I saw Doug again, pacing in front of his garage. He looked rattled, not angry, just nervous. When his eyes met mine, he quickly turned away and went inside. A few minutes later, Karen's SUV pulled out and drove off without him. The next day, Ellen Reyes, the journalist, finally called. "Your story blew up," she said. "I've had over 50 emails from your neighbors. But listen, I got something strange this morning." "What do you mean?" I asked. "An anonymous tip. Someone sent me screenshots of bank statements. Large transfers from the HOA account to a private consulting firm. Repeated every quarter. I checked. That firm doesn't exist. A fake company. Money laundering through HOA dues. Do you know who runs that account?" I asked. Ellen's voice dropped. "It's under the name Douglas Miller. Your neighbor. That confirmed everything. Karen and Doug weren't just bullies. They were profiting off the HOA. Rick and the others were helping cover it up. We needed to get that information to the city immediately. Ellen said she was already working with a legal contact to protect the sources. But before she could finish, her line went static. Then silence. I tried calling her back. No answer. A minute later, I heard a loud thud outside my window. I pulled the curtain back. Nothing. Just the street, quiet and still. Then I looked down. A small envelope lay on my porch. No stamp, no writing, just like before. Inside, a flash drive. I hesitated, then plugged it into an old laptop disconnected from Wi-Fi. The folder inside was labeled, "You're Next." I clicked it open and froze. It wasn't a threat. It was a video. Footage of Ellen's car parked outside a diner, with Karen standing right beside it, talking to someone I couldn't see. And in the reflection of the car window, I saw myself walking up the sidewalk just minutes later. They were watching both of us. At the same time, the clip looped again and again on my screen. Ellen at the diner, Karen beside her, that hidden figure just outside the frame. The timestamp was from the night before the call. I tried Ellen's number 10 times, straight to voicemail. I left a message. "Call me back. Please tell me you're okay." Hours passed. Nothing. By evening, her article had vanished from the local news site. Every link redirected to a 404 page. Her social accounts were silent. Even the email thread, where we'd shared files, was wiped. Clean, deleted from my sent folder. That was the moment I knew this had gone far beyond a neighborhood feud. I drove to the diner from the footage. The hostess said Ellen had left around 8 p.m. alone. A few minutes later, a silver SUV pulled out of the lot. No license plate visible in the low light. But I didn't need one to guess who it was. When I got back home, my mailbox was open again. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. "Stop talking to reporters. Final warning. No signature. No surprise. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. Every sound outside sent my heart racing. The crunch of gravel, a dog bark, the low hum of an engine somewhere down the street. That night, I set up a third camera, hidden behind the attic vent, overlooking both the street and Karen's driveway. Then I waited. At 2:14 a.m., movement. A car pulled up to Karen's house. Not the SUV, another one, darker, maybe a rental. 2 men got out. They carried boxes into her garage. When they came out again, one of them was holding a familiar yellow envelope, the kind Ellen used for her documents. I grabbed my phone and recorded the live feed from the attic camera. backing it up to an external drive immediately. If they were destroying evidence, I wasn't going to let it vanish twice. The next morning, Karen's house looked normal. Sprinklers on, curtains open. But as I left for work, she stepped onto her porch and called out sweetly, "Morning. Rough night? You should really get more sleep. You're starting to look paranoid." Her tone sent chills down my spine. She knew I'd seen something. By noon, another message arrived, this time slid under my windshield wiper. "You have 24 hours to stop." No threats, no signature, just that single deadline. For the first time since this began, I wasn't angry. I was genuinely scared. Because if they could make a reporter disappear and erase her story overnight, what could they do to me? I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't. Every instinct told me something bad was about to happen. The 24-hour warning ran circles in my head like a ticking clock. I couldn't silence. I spent the morning triple-checking locks, sealing windows, and reviewing every minute of the overnight footage from my attic cam. Nothing unusual, just quiet streets, porch lights, and the occasional passing car. It almost felt calm, if not for the dread twisting in my stomach. By noon, the calm shattered. A white van pulled up across the street. No markings, no plates. It parked facing my house and just sat there. The engine never turned off. I watched from the window, heart pounding. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I grabbed my phone and called the police. The dispatcher promised to send a unit, but half an hour later, no one showed up. The van was still there. At 1:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Still think this is about a lawn?" A voice asked. It was low, distorted, like it was coming through a voice modulator. "Who is this?" "You should have stayed quiet. You had your warning. Now the whole HOA pays the price." The line went dead. I looked back outside. The van was gone. At that moment, I knew I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I called Sandra, the neighbor who'd helped me early on. She came over immediately, and when I showed her the messages, her face went pale. "We need proof before they erase everything," she said. "You said you backed up the video of those guys in Karen's garage?" "Yeah," I said. "On an external drive. Then we go to the police in person. Tonight." Before we could leave, someone knocked at my door. Hard, deliberate knocks that echoed through the house. I froze. "Don't answer," Sandra whispered. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar face. "Rick, the HOA president." "Open up," he said. "We need to talk, now." I cracked the door just enough to speak. "About what?" "About the chaos you've caused," he said, his voice calm but his eyes cold. "You think going public helps anyone? You're dragging all of us down. Maybe you should have thought about that before covering for Karen and Doug." I shot back. His expression hardened. "You have no idea what you've started." He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "They aren't afraid of you. They're afraid of who's behind this. And trust me, once they're done cleaning up, they'll come for anyone left standing." Then he turned and walked away. Sandra whispered, "Who's they?" I didn't have an answer. But for the first time, I realized this wasn't just an HOA problem anymore. It was something much bigger. That night, I couldn't shake Rick's words. They'll come for anyone left standing. Who was they? Sandra and I drove to the police station just after dark, the flash drive with the garage footage in her hand. But when we got there, something strange happened. The officer at the front desk took our names, typed for a moment, then frowned. He excused himself and went into the back room. 10 minutes later, a man in plain clothes came out. He didn't introduce himself, didn't show a badge, just said, "We'll take it from here. Hand over the drive." Sandra whispered, "No way. I asked for identification." He smirked and said, "You called about the HOA situation, right?" "Yeah, we've been briefed." That's when I knew something was off. I pocketed the flash drive and said, "We'll follow up tomorrow." We turned and left before he could stop us. In the car, Sandra exhaled shakily. "They're connected, aren't they?" I didn't answer. But deep down, I knew she was right. We didn't go straight home. Instead, we stopped. By Mike's house, the neighbor who'd been fined for the shed earlier in the story. I knew he'd been quietly collecting evidence against the HOA, too. When I told him what happened at the station, his face went pale. "I've heard rumors," he said. Rick and Doug weren't just embezzling. They were laundering money through the HOA for a construction firm that doesn't exist. Someone higher up is protecting them. There's a meeting tonight, board only, at the community center. If we can record that, we'll have proof. It was risky, but it was our only shot. At 10 p.m., we parked behind the community center, where the lights inside glowed faintly through the blinds. Voices echoed, Rick, Doug, and Karen among them. I crept closer with my phone recording through the window. "Reyes is gone," Rick was saying. "The journalist's files are destroyed. We just need to deal with the neighbor." "Already being handled," Doug replied. "By tomorrow, the footage won't exist." My pulse hammered. I peeked around the corner, saw folders spread across the table, one of them labeled with my address. Sandra whispered, "We've got enough. Let's go." But before we could back away, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Hey, who's there?" I bolted, nearly tripping over the curb. Sandra followed, clutching my arm. We dove into the car and sped off as someone shouted behind us. When we finally reached my driveway, my front door was wide open. The lights inside were on, and the smell of burned plastic drifted out into the night. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew I was too late. My living room reeked of smoke. The carpet was scorched near the TV stand, and my desk, where I'd kept my laptop, hard drive, and backup footage, was reduced to a mess of melted plastic and ash. Someone had broken in and torched everything. Sandra covered her mouth. "Oh my God." I ran to the desk, hoping maybe the external drive survived. It hadn't. Even the outlet had been ripped out of the wall. Deliberate sabotage. They wanted everything gone. I checked the rest of the house. Drawers open. Closet rummaged through. Every camera wire cut clean. They knew exactly what to destroy. On the kitchen table, a single sheet of paper sat under a rock. "You should have listened." No signature, no fingerprints. Just those words burned into my memory. Sandra called 911, but once again, no one came. We waited 30 minutes. 40. Nothing. Finally, a single patrol car rolled by slowly. Didn't even stop, then kept going. I felt the weight of realization hit. This wasn't incompetence. It was control. Someone higher up had silenced the response. "Who do we even call now?" Sandra asked, her voice trembling. "Not local," I said. "We go federal." I still had one piece of leverage. The footage I'd recorded on my phone during the community center meeting. It wasn't much, but it had voices, faces, and most importantly, their confession. That night, we drove to a motel 2 towns away. Somewhere without cameras, without a trail. I used a burner laptop to upload the video to a secure cloud drive and sent an encrypted link to Ellen's old editor, the one she'd said she trusted if anything happened to her. I didn't know if he'd even see it, but it was our last chance. As I finally sat down on the motel bed, exhaustion hit me like a wave. My house, my files, gone. My name dragged through HOA rumors. I didn't even feel safe closing my eyes. Then, around 3 a.m., headlights swept across the motel curtains. A car idled outside for several minutes. Sandra peeked through the blinds. "It's that same black sedan." Before I could react, my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message popped up. "You think a motel will keep you safe?" Attached was a live photo. Me, standing by the window seconds ago. The live photo froze me. The timestamp matched the exact moment I'd looked toward the window. That meant someone outside wasn't just watching. They were close enough to take that shot and send it instantly. Sandra whispered, "We need to go, now." We packed in under a minute. I left the lights on, hoping to make it look like we were still inside. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty except for that black sedan parked across from us, its engine faintly humming. I slid into the driver's seat, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Sandra crouched low beside me. When we pulled out, the sedan's headlights flared to life. "They're following," she said. We drove through 2 intersections, then a gas station, trying to shake them. The car stayed with us, never getting too close, never falling behind, like a predator toying with its prey. I took a sudden left onto a side road leading toward the outskirts of town. Empty fields, no traffic. If they were going to make a move, it would be here. Sandra held up her phone, filming through the rear window. At least we'll have proof if they try anything. A second later, the sedan's high beams exploded behind us, blinding white light that filled the car. "Hold on!" I shouted, swerving onto the dirt shoulder. Gravel sprayed everywhere. The sedan sped up inches from our bumper. Then, crack! Something hit the back window. It didn't shatter, but the glass spiderwebbed instantly. Sandra screamed, ducking down. "They're trying to run us off!" I floored it. The tires skidded, struggling for traction, until the road curved sharply left. I cut the wheel hard, and the sedan overshot, spinning briefly before regaining control. That gave us just enough time to reach the main road again. We didn't stop until we hit a busy intersection filled with traffic and streetlights. The sedan disappeared down a side street and didn't return. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke, just heavy breathing and the sound of the car engine ticking in the cool air. "They're not giving up," I said quietly. Sandra nodded. "Then we don't either." We found another motel, this time paying in cash and checking in under fake names. Before we went to sleep, I transferred the phone recording of the chase to multiple encrypted backups and sent a copy to Ellen's editor again, just in case. The next morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. "You've made your point. Now let's talk, privately." Below the message was a location pin. The address was the community park, and the sender's name was Rick. The message from Rick felt like a trap, but it also felt like the only chance I had to end this without losing everything. Sandra tried to stop me. "You're not going alone," she said firmly, pacing the motel floor. "I have to," I told her. "If I bring anyone, he'll bolt. He wants control. I can use that." We agreed she'd wait nearby, parked by the old playground where she could see everything. I set my phone to record audio automatically as soon as I left the car. The park was empty when I arrived. Gray sky, wind whispering through the trees. Then I saw him, Rick, standing by the picnic tables, hands in his coat pockets. He looked exhausted, like the stress had aged him years overnight. "You came," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," I replied. "After what your people pulled last night." He sighed. "You don't get it. I'm not the one pulling the strings anymore." "Then who is?" Rick looked around before leaning closer. "Doug got in deep with a developer, off the books. The HOA was just a front. The money, the fines, the missing funds, all of it, fed into a shell company that's buying up land for rezoning. They wanted your property next because it connects two lots. They need for a commercial project." My stomach dropped. So this was all about money. "It's always about money," he said bitterly. "But it's bigger now. City inspectors, contractors, lawyers. They're all in on it. You think your missing footage, your erased emails, were random? That's Doug's guy in IT. He cleans everything." I pulled out my phone, the red recording light blinking faintly. "Then why tell me all this?" Rick's eyes darted toward the parking lot. "Because I'm done. Doug's lost control. The people he works for, let's just say they don't like loose ends. Ellen didn't disappear because of me. They made her vanish." The words hit me like ice. Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm. "You didn't hear this from me. You want to live? Get out of Maple Ridge. Tonight." Then he turned and started walking away. Fast. That's when I heard the sound. A low rumble, growing louder. A black SUV screeched into the lot, stopping just short of the picnic tables. Two men stepped out, one of them Doug. "Rick!" Doug shouted. "You just couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you?" Rick ran. The men chased him across the field. And then, a single gunshot echoed through the park. Rick collapsed. Sandra screamed from the distance. I froze. Everything went silent, except the sound of my phone still recording in my pocket. The sound of that gunshot echoed for what felt like forever. I couldn't move, just stood there as Rick hit the ground, his body motionless under the pale park lights. Doug shouted something I couldn't make out, then ran back to the SUV. The second man, taller, heavier, wearing gloves, grabbed something from Rick's coat before following him. The SUV tore off down the road, tires screaming against the asphalt. I sprinted to Rick's side. He was still breathing, barely. "Stay with me!" I shouted, pressing my jacket against the wound. "Who were they?" He struggled to speak, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. His eyes locked on mine. "Not HOA," he whispered. "Higher!" "Files. Cloud. Check." Then he went still. I sat there, numb, sirens wailing somewhere far away but not fast enough. Sandra ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "We have to go. If they find us here, they'll think we did it." She was right. I hit stop on my phone recording, then immediately sent the file to 3 backup drives. Cloud storage, encrypted email, and the same editor Ellen had trusted. The recording had everything. Rick's confession, the gunshot, Doug's voice. We drove all night, heading north. Every headlight behind us felt like a tail. Every shadow looked like another SUV. By dawn, we reached a rest stop off the highway. Exhausted, shaking, we sat in silence. Then Sandra looked at me and said, "We can't just run forever. That recording, it's proof. If we get it to the right people," she was right. But we couldn't trust local police, not after what happened before. We needed someone who couldn't be bought. I reached out to a contact Ellen had once mentioned, a federal investigator. She said was the only one who didn't blink when threatened. I sent the audio file, the video from the community meeting, and a full timeline of events. An hour later, I got a reply. "Meet me, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Federal Building. Don't bring anyone you don't trust." It was signed only S. McCrae. We drove straight through to the city. No stops, no detours. When we finally parked outside the Federal Building, my hands were still trembling. For the first time in weeks, I thought. Maybe this would end. Maybe justice would finally catch up to Karen, Doug, and everyone behind them. But as we got out of the car, I noticed something that froze me cold. Across the street, parked in the shade, was that same black sedan. And this time, the driver stepped out, smiling. The man from the sedan leaned casually against the door, watching me with a calm that made my stomach twist. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't have to be. Sandra gripped my arm. "That's him," she whispered. "The one from the motel. The one who took the photo." He crossed the street slowly, hands visible, no weapon. His smile never faltered. "Mr. Miller," he said, using my full name. "You've caused quite the mess." I didn't respond. My thumb hovered over the record button on my phone again. He stopped just a few feet away. "Before you do anything stupid, let me explain something. The people you think you're fighting? They're nothing. Middlemen. The real work. The real money. It's already buried. Literally." "What do you want?" I asked. He looked past me toward the building. "That file you sent? It's already been flagged. Every agency that touches it will forward it up the chain. To us. It'll never see daylight." "Us?" I asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "Let's just say the HOA wasn't the first front we used." Sandra stepped between us. "You can't stop this," she said. "The files are public now. You think you erased everything, but copies exist everywhere." For the first time, his expression changed. He didn't look confident anymore, just calculating. "Then I suppose we'll have to clean up faster." Before he could say another word, 2 black SUVs turned the corner. But these weren't his. The doors flew open, and agents poured out, armed, shouting commands. The man froze, eyes wide, as the agents surrounded him. A woman in a dark suit approached us, flashing a badge. "S. McCrae, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You two are safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign. They took the man from the sedan into custody. Along with 2 others they pulled from a nearby car. McCrae later told us they'd been watching this operation for months. The same shell company Rick had mentioned was tied to multiple HOA networks across the state, laundering millions through fake maintenance contracts. My footage, my recordings, Ellen's work. It had finally been enough to push them to act. By evening, arrests were made. Doug and Karen were among them. The entire HOA board was dismantled. Weeks later, the neighborhood was quiet again. Grass regrew where tire marks once scarred my lawn. Sometimes, I still catch myself checking the cameras twice before bed. And every so often, when the wind shifts just right, I hear the faint echo of Rick's words in my mind. They aren't afraid of you. They're afraid of the truth. Because in the end, that's what it all came down to. One truth, buried under one ordinary lawn, and a homeowner who refused to let it stay hidden.